Steve's back from Nashville, and we're a well-oiled machine.
Hey, it's off a vacation. We're getting ready for the second half of the season.
How was Nashville?
You just took a deep breath, and it was good as always.
Okay. Expensive?
Maybe very good. Say it again.
Expensive?
I'll let you know when I get the bill.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not.
It's not cheap.
It's not a cheap long weekend. No, but. So here's it. Like, we don't drink coffee, right? Like, that was my excuse.
Okay.
We did Europe, right? Like, you think about the stuff we don't spend money on throughout the whole year and save it just for that. We had the conversation while we were down there. I said to Susan, I said, hey, do you, like, we all know that I enjoy this weekend. Like, I don't.
This is your happy place. It's your Disney World.
I'm like, but is that? Do you? And she's like, no, this is good. This is great. So I feel good.
I'm happy you're back. I'm happy you're back safely.
Safely, exactly.
Yeah. This is the Stuff Summer Says podcast with
Steve.
Steve, it's fitting that you would go to Nashville because we have a great Southern related guest, I think, this week, and we're going to talk about the South, and then we're also going to talk about Southern Cal as well. So it's working. Look at this.
Look at that.
So we're going to kind of switch the order of the show this week. We're going to talk about, I think it's just the way we have the show flowing, and it'll make sense when we get to the second half of the show. But we're going to talk about the USC game first, and then we're going to go into our interview with John T. Edge, who is the host of the show called True South on the SEC Network, which Steve was very fired up to do an interview with. And it was a great conversation about storytelling. And then we're going to go into a conversation about storyline/storytelling for the second half of the Penn State football season.
We sound somewhat organized.
Synergy. Look at us working together. So that's how this show is going to work. So it's a little bit different, but bear with us. You're happy we're here. I'm happy you're here. Steve's here. That's all that matters. Okay, let's talk about the game. I think I have been like wrestling where to put this in the James Franklin pantheon of wins of most importance in Penn State football history, and I keep coming up with 2 to 3. Like I think it Ohio State's always going to be 1. I think maybe Big Ten championship is 2-ish, and then I really think we're going to maybe look back on this win and think 3. For right now, at least we're looking at this win as 3. And I know that feels like an exaggeration. I know that feels like a recency bias. But I just think, how many times have we watched Penn State football go through every emotion experience that USC fans, USC players, USC coaching staff were going through the second that Penn State won that game? I like, there was a shot, CBS got a great shot of Lincoln Riley, just like right the second the field goal went through, and just like he looks dejected and sad, and but it's not in a we just lost the game, it's a I need to figure out my program situation. And it was like, I've been there, and I know what that exact feeling looks like as a fan, at least. And it just was felt like a great reprieve to come off on the other side of one of those games and not be in those shoes again. And I don't know. I think there's so many different aspects of the game that I wanted to get to, and that was part of the reason why I wanted to slide it up, because again, not just trying to invert a pyramid and everything, but I just think there was a lot there. What was your immediate takeaway?
As we were watching it, I wasn't in a position to look at, if you're on ESPN, right? They do the chance to win throughout the game, right? The percentage thing. This would have been one of those ones, right, where it went from 90 something against to 90 plus for. It's a fun game, and it was a fun game, and maybe even more fun for me because I don't feel as invested as you sometimes. Like, I mean, just I feel like I'm a little less fanny about some stuff.
You're curmudgeon-y.
Not right. Yes, I'm a curmudgeon, right? It's about you. It's about me being a curmudgeon, right? But I'm like, this is pretty. Who would that happened? And that happened now too. And they're going to try to do this. Oh, and they did, right? So I mean, and you have, the individual stuff. Forget the Tyler Warren stuff, which you can't forget. But it's just dropped passes, and then they figured out how to catch passes. It was a fun game. And I think it is probably top 5 for sure, although I liked how you said for now, because God forbid they spit the bit in a week or so, and then you're like, here we go again. But now they've given themselves some clearance to have one bad one because they're clearly in great shape for the college football playoff, even if one thing goes wrong. So yeah, big win, big fun win.
I think let's start there because I think that's my other biggest takeaway from this. I think in a lot of ways this changes so many dynamics of the season for Penn State football, and I think also maybe something with the result in Eugene also probably had something to do with that. And I agree with you. Like they do need to take care of business in Wisconsin, and I think not to tease one of our future interviews, but we had a guest on who kind of was like, Penn State takes care of the games that they're supposed to take care of. To me, that Wisconsin game is a game that they're supposed to take care of. Now and then they go to the Ohio State game. All of the pressure is off Penn State, and all of the pressure is now on Ohio State. Mm-hmm. When has that happened in the that didn't even happen in 2016 when Penn State beat Ohio State? Like, I just think this team now knows that they can come back from, I wouldn't say the dead, but pretty darn close to it. They know that they have guys that they can reliably depend on, whether it's throughout the entire course of the game in the shape of the quarterback or the tight end, or in many microcosms of Julian Fleming or even Ryan Barker making big kicks. Like, that's what I think, why I think in a lot of ways, it felt very, like, it was just such a reprieve. And I think the other thing with, like, the Tyler Warren thing is, like, he is arguably, I think, at least under James Franklin, probably the second best individual effort game. The 2017 Iowa Saquon Barkley game is absurd. Like, go look at that stat line. We were just talking about this relatively recently with Tyler Warren, in fact. But I think they have a true superstar there, and I think I'm probably gonna write this week. Like, I think it's warranted to take the, like, Heisman thing out of the meme phase and at least put him in the conversation. I'm not saying give him the trophy, but I think he's one of the best players in football right now. And I think that also comes into it. I don't know.
If he has the second half of the season like he's had the first half of the season, it'd be hard to not argue that he doesn't deserve to be in New York for the award, to discuss it at least.
Right. Like, and that's what I'm saying. Like, it's I don't know. I think in so many ways that game was just a fascinating. It felt like there was a little bit, and it seemed like that was pretty emotional after the game. There was I haven't watched the Drew Aller interview, but the James Franklin interview, he was kind of getting choked up on CBS, and then Ryan Barker's getting choked up. Saw there's a great Joe Hermit got a great picture of Jalen Reed crying. Like, there was a lot of emotion, pent up emotion, and I think they let some of that go. And I think the season in some ways only gets easier, even if the schedule gets harder, because they have confidence now.
Yeah, they have confidence, and they have some room to play with. Yes, the schedule gets harder. I mean, because, like, as they had in the graphic during the game, the 106th hardest schedule coming into the game. That's going to change because the teams in the back end of the schedule are better. But they could lose to Ohio State, and it doesn't matter, right? So that just, not that that's the expectation in that locker room or whatever else, but it does. It's not the end of the world if that happens, because they're going to be in a position to be like, oh, okay, so we're not going to get a bye. We're still in the playoff, right? And I think that makes a big difference. So it was. I don't know that it was a cathartic game for those people involved, but it was just so entertaining from start to finish, good and bad, right? Everybody got to go on the ride, and I saw people social media like, oh, that was so stressful. That's what it's about, right? Like, nobody wants cakewalks, right? You want that kind of stuff. I mean, you can say you want cakewalks, but this is what makes college football fun.
That's just gonna say, like, there's you have to have something slightly wrong with you in your head if you're a college football fan, and I think the game like that is case in point and proof of how that shakes out. Let's briefly do this Darian and Steve style. I didn't go to the game, but I do want to ask, what were your thoughts on the broadcast?
I want to take someone's drone away from them and not let them play with it ever again. CBS, that's that producer and director shot, like that little, not little, it's the big sweeping established shot with the drone, or wasn't a blimp with it. Stop it. Once or twice a game's enough. Not every time. And kudos for the effort they must have put in the pregame conversations with Penn State to know about the Tyler Warren play, right? Because when you look at the replays, the cameras were in the right spots. They did it. They knew it was coming. So kudos for that. Although I do think Gary Danielson could have pointed out that it wasn't good coverage on the play. It was pass interference, but still.
No, I think that's very fair. I just knew you were fired up about the drone shot because I also was fired up about the drone shot, and it was like, I don't think we need to make anything this cinematic. I just feel like somebody quite literally, like you said, got a new drone for Christmas and was like, we got to play with it this weekend. And
well, maybe they were in Hollywood, cinematic. Maybe that's what they
sure.
wanted. Wide sweeping shots at the Coliseum. It's historic, but just stop it.
I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I thought Brad Nessler still has his fastball. Gary's fine. I don't know. Gary's very much fine to me. Like we've talked about this before. The CBS thing is just very much a fine, average experience. Nothing great, nothing terrible. They told me the game story. I got to watch the game. Might have been slightly annoyed by the drone shots, but nothing as annoying as Fox. And maybe nothing as good as NBC, and that's fine. Like they're in the middle slot, and I'm totally okay with that. Yep. So okay. All right. You really wanted to have our guest on this week, and so I'm going to let you set up the interview, explain why you wanted to have on our guest this week, because it was a great conversation.
So we're going out of Big Ten country to SEC country. The show is called True South, hosted by John T. Edge, who you'll hear. Well, no, this was before the interview. He asked us why him, and I said because you answered the email, which we'll take every time. He's a very good storyteller and writer. He talked about that. He talked about the show, and we talked a little bit about how the show fits in SEC country, right? And we didn't get to it. Could this work anywhere else? I don't know. I think it maybe could, but probably not, because the South is just different that way, and they tell the story so well. So that's why I was excited. I just it's must see TV, and it's helpful for me to be must see TV because there's like 4 episodes or 5 episodes in a season, so it's easy for me. But he's great, and I think you'll enjoy hearing what he has to say.
Perfect. All right, we'll go listen to that. We'll be back after that.
So we have had vice presidents of ESPN, right? We've had directors of the Super Bowl. We've had Penn State All-Americans, and I love them all and know many of them. I don't care. I am more excited for this guest than anybody we've ever had in our 5 years. With us today, because he was kind enough to answer an email, is John T. Edge, who is the host and often writer, I guess, in terms of the credits, of True South, which I believe is perhaps the best TV show on sports-related TV. So he's going to join us a little bit and talk about all that show is, which is a lot, and we'll try to get through it. John, can you step back and just kind of give us a synopsis of where the show came from and why it exists?
Sure. I mean, in a way, I think the show was a thought experiment when Rosalind Durant was head of the network, head of the SEC network. And it was an attempt to say, we're really good at sports programming. We're reaching an audience that's devoted to us. What else might they watch? What other ways might we engage them? So it was really her bold idea of doing this, of greenlighting this thing we wanted to do. Was Rosalind's vision. The idea came from Wright Thompson, who, as you know, is a senior writer at ESPN. We happen to live 8 blocks apart in Oxford, Mississippi, and are friends. We were friends 7 years ago. We began making the show. We're a lot better friends now. But we had lunch one day at a place just north of the square here in Oxford called Handy Andy. And Handy Andy, it says Handy Andy barbecue, but you really don't go there for the barbecue. At least I don't. I go there for chili burgers, chili cheeseburgers. Specifically, really more often I'm getting a cheeseburger, not a chili cheese. Chili cheese has been more recent introduction. Anyway, a cheeseburger. And we were there talking about the ways the South is portrayed in movies, in films, in podcasts, however the South is talked about. And I don't think this is hubris speaking, but it was like, how can we get it right? How can we sidestep all the myths and the stereotypes to try to get at what the South really is today, not what it used to be, but what it is today, and really look around and try to see the place, appreciate it, love the place, while also being critical, to actually see our place. That's the whole gig.
And that's, for me, that's what works, because food's kind of gets me in the front door, right? Like, hey, I'm going to talk about food. And then there's history and culture and geography and sociology. And it all works because it's so well written, and you tell stories so well. Why are you guys so good at, why are you, or why is the show so good at storytelling, do you think?
I mean, there's a bunch of different answers to that. One is the greatest part of this show is a result of our director, Tim Horgan. Tim, who's a veteran of ESPN sports for a long, long while, has a production company, Bluefin Entertainment. And Tim is, I really think, a visual genius. I think in words. I've been a print writer for a long, long time. Working with Tim and working with Wright, I've learned to marry words and pictures. I mean, it sounds like the simplest grade school thing, but it hasn't been for me. Learning to write a show that's driven by visuals has been new for me. But what has made it work, I think, is no matter where we hail from, like Tim, our director, lives in Connecticut. I live in Oxford. Our cameramen are spread everywhere. Everyone is trying to get at an honest narrative about this place we call home. I call home, right? And I call home. I think it's good, and I really do think it's good. I'm proud of it. I think it's good because we're honestly trying to answer a question, and that question is really simple. What is the South today? What are the stories that matter? That's it.
One of the things I appreciate about the show is it as you mentioned, kind of avoids the caricature of the South, and it presents it in this honest fashion, both obviously this particularly with the South, the good and the bad. But I think the other important aspect that I think of when I think of the South is food. So why, besides your interest in food,
Sure.
why is food the main vessel, the right vessel to tell the story?
Well, I think food is, at restaurants, we find common bonds. Like we join together in a restaurant and we create a makeshift community in that moment at a table, in a diner, in a roadside barbecue joint, wherever it is. And food is an expression of the places we claim. Where are you from? I'm from the place they cook this kind of food. I'm from the place they eat this kind of food. We have a tribal connection to the sort of food that comes from our communities, and we claim the places where they cook it, where people serve it. They're like clubhouses for a community. And I think that's the connection back to sports too. We have an affinity for, a belief in, these representations of our home.
So I guess kind of took the question a little bit out of my mouth there, but how does food shape college football fandom?
It doesn't. I mean, food and college football are both reflections of place and people.
Makes sense.
And both of them the ways to understand the South. You can understand the South by talking to people who are devoted to, a team in Pennsylvania or a team in Texas. If you listen to them, you'll understand their long-term relationship with that place. The same thing happens when you hear people talk about not their favorite team, but their favorite fried chicken or their favorite hamburger. It brings out everything that really goes unstated until you actually start drilling down.
What were your expectations for the show?
That, we'd get the first season completed and it wouldn't suck. But once we got past that first season, and I realized how talented our camera folks are, like the fact that everybody got along and everybody was, when we were figuring out how to make a TV show, everybody had made bits of TV, but no one had made a TV show before. No one had made a narrative 30-minute television show. So we taught ourselves in a bunch of different ways. And that was joyful, and that bonded us together. And that meant that, hey, we did this first season, and it resoundingly didn't suck. We get better the second, the third, the fourth. And I think we get better every season. And I'm proud. I'm really proud of what we get to do and thankful.
And as a viewer, you've taken us so many, forget about the geographic places, you've taken us places where New Orleans, and we're talking Italian food, and you ask about the French washing of the culture there, right? Or for someone who likes to go to Nashville right now, I learned years ago, thanks to you, what a meat and three town is, right? And
Yeah.
it's just those kind of things that make it work. How much goes into an episode? Like if this season's showing now, like when did you start this season, and how does the process of an episode season come together?
We start out scouting for episodes at least a year before we begin filming. So, we'll begin filming again in April of next year. And we started scouting back in April of last year. And, there are a number of components. Some are kind of invisible to the viewer, but for us, we've got to find a good story. Like it can't just be there's great Bosnian food in suburban St. Louis. There's got to be some holistic story, some big takeaway that you, Steve, walk away with in your head. And this show has got to add up to that. And then we have to find a mechanism to tell that story. And two restaurants have to do that work for us. And the restaurants not only have to have good stories, the restaurants have to serve really good food, because we have so many people now who travel behind the show. I've had two different people send me T-shirts they got made up that had the list of restaurants they visited on a summer road trip, like a band scroll on the back of an album.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that formula, and that formula is not easy. We eat a lot of bad food to get to the good food, like really bad food. But that research is everybody's favorite part of it. Like I'm going on a research trip 2 weeks down to South Mississippi because I think we can make a show in Waynesboro, Mississippi, which is way down pine belt of Mississippi. And there's an old guard place there called Cooley's for hamburgers, and there's another place that does drive-through fried chicken and does it really well. The kind that like you get a two-piece dark in a little pasteboard container. That kind of simple fried chicken. And I'm trying to look for what's the bigger story. Like I know I love those two places. What's the story? Is it about what it's like to be a pulpwooder in the 21st century? Is it a history of pulpwood? Is it what? I don't know. I don't know yet. I got to figure it out.
What has surprised you about yourself going through making this show, and what you've learned about yourself?
That's a great question. I mean, one thing, the thing that has surprised me is the degree which people trust me, and reveal tough things about themselves. I mean, the episode we made in Dublin, Georgia, with Promise of Hope, the recovery center at its core, two women going through recovery, who told me the darkest things that had happened in their lives, with 4 cameras staring us down. And in that conversation, all of those cameras went away, and we just talked to one another. And I came out of that. It's like coming out of a seclusion chamber almost. Like you've dialed in, you're looking at somebody, you're having a heart-to-heart conversation, the cameras drop away. And I came out of that just marveling at the trust these women put in me. I don't think I would trust someone that much with my greatest vulnerabilities. It's a hard thing to do. It really humbles me, um, and then as far as my own realization, I've been thinking about this over a long time. And you said a minute ago, our show shows the good and bad of the South, right? And sometimes we get. I mean, it's stunning how many people respond positively to the show. I'm deeply grateful for that. When we do get pushback, it is oftentimes like, "Why you got to tell that story again?" And the thing I've come to realize, and this is something both for my writing more broadly and my writing for the show, and just the way I move through the world, that I think if you love a place, if you love a person, um, criticism in the right spirit, well-intentioned criticism, is an act of love. It's saying to someone or saying to the place you call home, I think this could be a little bit better. I think we could do this better. And I don't think of that as mean-spirited. I don't think it is limiting. I think it's actually expansive, and I think it's about love. Not to get too sad.
In terms of your interviewing, you talked about those folks being forthcoming with the cameras around.
Yeah.
For you, in terms of interviewing and asking questions, do you go about it differently with the cameras? I don't know, as backup, maybe you don't have to take as many notes, or is it easier to have a conversation to try to pull things out, even though there's all that going on around you?
I mean, I will write down questions I want to ask people, and you probably see this in the show. I always have a notebook in my hand when I'm talking to people, but usually, and sometimes I'll show, because if people are really nervous, I'll show them my questions. Like, here are the things I'm going to ask you. But my handwriting is so bad they can't ever read it. Um, but I try to write those questions down. They're in my head, and then I try to put it away. I try to put the notebook away. I've always got it there if I need to turn to it, and just actually talk to people. Um, One of the things I really try to do, and is whatever power I have, and I have a lot because I'm the person who brought the cameras. I try to relinquish the power in whatever ways I can to if I'm talking to somebody, sit on the floor and look up at them. If I'm on their same level, try to go below their level. Like, try to acknowledge that, like, by bringing a camera to the party, I screwed up the party, and realizing how much power I have.
You're a James Beard Award winner. But did you ever imagine that you'd have a show on ESPN or the ESPN
Oh, hell
family?
no. Hell no. No, I mean, this is, I, you know, y'all watch the show. If you try to explain the show to somebody, three-quarters of the people look at you like you're crazy. So it's a show about, maybe it's about identity. It uses food as a way to get there. It's broadcast on a sports network. And, the next question is, how in the hell is that? Why the hell is that? How did people get away with that? It makes no sense until you watch the show.
I think in some ways, maybe with the brand of the SEC network, it also fits in. It is it's the comfort food, for lack of a better term, around football, around sports. It's warming in that way, and I think that's one of the reasons why I enjoy it.
I appreciate that. Maybe your comment made me think about. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but your comment made me think about something. Is that we get a lot of responses to this show from people of faith, and that they may be Jewish, they may be Christian, they may be Muslim, like whatever they are, but people of faith and preachers and rabbis and other holy people respond to the show, and I think, because a lot of this really is about belief. It's about belief in your fellow man, woman. It's about belief in a place. It's about belief.
I think that makes sense. I think that comes through and shines through. I have to ask, we are a sports media show. What's it like working with Wright?
He's a pain in the ass. No, in all seriousness, I'm when we started this show, I was in my mid-50s, and Wright, I think Wright's like 12 or 13 years younger than me. And it's a humbling thing to learn from somebody who is younger than you. I'm a good writer, but I've gotten to be a better writer working with Wright. Both the edits in the early stages of the show, like his edits on my writing were extensive and transformative, and he had to rewrite me. But as I've gained confidence and as the show's gained confidence now, I know how to write a TV show. It's a bonkers thing to learn to do when you're an old man, to learn how to write a TV show. And I learned that from Wright. In our first season of the show, actually the first episode we ever filmed, it was the third, I think, that aired, or the fourth. We got in a wreck that almost killed us. I was in the front seat driving, and Wright was a passenger seat. So we were already friends, but that wreck and this work has bonded us together more closely. I respect him and love him.
I think people feel the show. I mean, I think you talk about the faith, and there was a piece, I think, when you were at Bottle Tree Bakery talking about a place for people to belong. I think for those of us for whom it works, it feels like a place to belong, right? And that's what makes it enjoyable and refreshing. So thank you. We usually have Penn State people that we get out with 3 quick questions. I'm going to adapt 2, and we'll see if Darian does another. They're usually Penn State specific, but I'll try to make them Oxford specific if I can.
Okay.
I'm in Oxford for one night and one night only. Where do I go for the best dessert?
The dessert.
We usually ask ice cream because we have a creamery, so I'm trying to go dessert for you.
I would get a nightcap, a whiskey nightcap based on whatever the bartender Joe Stinchcomb wants to pour you at Bar Muse.
Wonderful. Let me see. We did ice cream. We did your go-to drink, your go-to place in Oxford. You can go out one place in the night. Where are you going and why?
One place to go in Oxford for a drink. Well, I already mentioned one drink, so we're going to another one.
Well, I know it's great.
I guess I'd go to City Grocery Bar, above City Grocery, right downtown on the square. Elliot, there is oftentimes my bartender. I drink Tiny Bombs, which is a beer made out of Memphis, Tennessee that I really like, a really good Pilsner, or I get Maker's Mark on the rocks.
And last question, Sportsy. You're the Greg Sankey. You're in charge of the SEC for a day.
Greg Sankey's already in charge of me, man.
Well, you're going to get a role reverse. What's the one SEC thing you would change if you were in charge? Whether it's a sport thing, a football thing, something else. You're czar of the SEC. What are you making happen?
Wow. I would make it so any player could transfer to the University of Mississippi, but they could not transfer back out.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
That's one of the best quick answers we've gotten on this show, and that's not just saying that. That's perfect.
John T., thank you very much. I know you got more important things to do than deal with us, but you have made us a better podcast tonight, and I can't wait for people to hear this. So thank you.
Y'all are generous and kind. Thank you, and thanks for seeing, I don't know, the possibilities of our show, and for asking such good questions. I appreciate it.
Have a good night. Thank you.
All right, y'all too. Bye-bye.
Steve, I think the main thing that I took away from, and you kind of said it there before the interview as well, I don't know that this works anywhere else, and in the North, because, and it's, I actually, so as we mentioned on the podcast there, Wright Thompson is the executive producer, one of the main producers of that show. I just listened to a podcast interview with Wright about his new book, which is about the Emmett Till murder. And he talks about the whole idea of tribe and humans being a tribal group, and how the South, in a lot of ways, kind of what we got into, is good and bad of tribe. But I think what came through in that conversation is there's so many hidden stories to tell that, like, sometimes you just got to open up your eyes and find them, and when they're shared, like the one about the episode that they had with the pork, the guy that makes pork, that seasons pork essentially and has a pork farm. I think it's just like those little stories. You're driving down the road in the middle of nowhere and you see something like that, there is still a story there. And I think that's beautiful. And I think that was one of the reasons why, when you told me about this show a while back, I was like, I'm kind of hooked on this. This is like, they've just got good storytelling.
Yeah, good stories are about people, and they do a great job of telling those stories about those people. And to bang the drum a little more about could it work other places. I've been to not every corner of Pennsylvania, but a lot of places and a lot of back roads. And I think about what I drive by and where they're, and I don't know if there's that many stories, right? Like, not that it's Pennsylvania versus the South, but even you just spread it out regionally, it just seems like the South is primed for this. And I think they do a wonderful job. And I'm glad he kind of pulled us behind the scenes of some stuff and spent some time telling us about it.
I think the other thing that is fascinating to me is the fact that they chose food to tell this story, and then they also decided, and John obviously has a James Beard Award, which is like the Oscars, the Heisman Trophy of writing about food. But I think choosing that vessel, I don't know if anything else clicks. I don't know if the stories click as well, because I think that's inviting to me, that somebody that does not live in that community, that doesn't live in that tribe. And I think that's one of the other reasons why the show does so well. I loved his answer about if he ever thought he'd have a show on an ESPN Family Network. I appreciate the honesty there.
He was great.
There. So, okay. Anything else from the interview? I could get.
Yeah, no, nothing else. I'm happy we had the opportunity, and again, happy he made time. So
cool. All right. So as we mentioned, we're gonna stick on the story theme. Obviously, we're not gonna be as detailed like that. Partly because I just kind of forgot about this week's homework until this morning, and I was like, "This is what the idea I came up with." So I asked you, let's pick 3 storylines each to pay attention to that might become storylines for Penn State football in the second half of the season, and then I put a stipulation, one of which has to be media related. I'm gonna let you go first. Pick one of your 3. Doesn't matter.
Let's say, just can they stay? Can they play with expectations? Right? We talked a little bit about that after USC, this little first part of the podcast. It's different. Can they play with, I don't know, it should be easier in some ways. They're the higher expectations, but maybe less pressure. So can they play that way?
I think that's fair. And I think that is something, I think that's what made that, like I said, I think that's what made that USC win so fascinating, is it unlocked such a different avenue that, I mean, you said 11-1, I said 10-2, and 10-1 and 11, or 10-2 and 11-1 are very different seasons. And I think if they play the way that they're supposed to, 11-1 now looks more realistic. Not to like change my prediction, but I just think it's so fascinating to now watch them have this opportunity in that way that I don't know that they have had maybe ever. Partly because of the way the conference was set up, partly because of the way the schedule was set up. So I think that's interesting. I think the biggest, not the biggest, but I think one of the bigger storylines is going to really pick up. And I think probably come maybe the weekend after the Washington game, I think we'll have a much better idea, indication, or understanding of where this sits. I'm fascinated to see if this is Drew Allar's last season at Penn State. I am. I think there is a core there that if they stay, they can probably wreak even more havoc next year. And I think if they go, I don't blame them, because I just think in this new NIL world, now Drew is going to go get a lot more money, but let's take Katron Allen, for example. Is he going to get that much more money? Like, I think NIL wise versus the first round or first year of his NFL contract, I think that's very interesting. So that would be my one.
That's nice, and it's nice. Yep, very forward thinking.
Thank you.
I just as simple, can they stay healthy? Right? Like, I mean, I think that's the storyline. They've been, there was news a couple weeks ago about, your injury report's longer than anybody else's, and all, Harris, Coach Franklin made note of that. But can they stay healthy? It's a long season. It's a grind anymore. They probably can't, probably don't want to test their depth if they don't have to. So I think that's important.
It was funny. Because then I felt like the depth chart the injury report thing was very short this week, and I think when he made note of that, I'm going to make note of that and check it out. I forget who that was. It may have been Frank Bodiani asking questions about that. Like I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. As we talked about before, I think the Tyler Warren thing. Like, can a tight end make a legitimate case at a Heisman Trophy? Now, a part of that is he has to keep performing. Obviously, he doesn't need to make 17 catches a game, but I think even if he has games like he had, Bowling Green, he has set a program record of yards. But like, even if he can have a few 100-yard, like 2 or 3 more 100-yard plus games, couple more touchdown catches, etc. Like, I'm interested to see how that plays out. Again, recency bias might come into play there and everything involved there, but I think it's at least worthy of paying attention to.
Maybe they could let him, punt once too, just to add some stuff, or kick off or something, so, just to add some variety.
Speaking of this, and speaking of tight ends, I've recently learned that Joey Jaravicius was like a punter. Like he punted his first season at Penn State.
That's true.
And I didn't know that, and that was wild. So yes, it's not out of. And remember when Hack punted? Can't wait to. I'd like to get him on the podcast specifically.
Some quick kicks there. Yeah, that was a joyous time when those were happening.
Yeah. Specifically ask about that situation. Okay. What's your media one?
My media
fan / media one.
This is fans and media, and this will never happen. But at least I'm aware that it's never going to happen. I am waiting for the moment, if maybe the light will go on at the end of the season, going into the next, that fans will understand that noon games mean your team is very good in the Big Ten because Fox then has them.
Are you going to dredge up your column from last year? Because that definitely didn't make anybody angry.
I know, but it's just true, right?
Yeah, I agree.
They get more first pick selections of any games during the season, more weekends they get to pick the number one game. So if your team is playing more games on Fox at noon, that means people believe they are one of the better teams in the conference and are going to draw more viewership. So I don't think fans will ever like it, but
I feel like we should maybe we should go through tonight. We don't have to do this, but this is like nerd Darian and Steve stuff. But I almost want to go through the three core slots of the big noon, the CBS 3:30, and the Fox or the NBC game, and kind of chart those out and then apply multipliers towards a specific team. Like Nebraska, because I feel like Nebraska's actually had a lot of big noon games. I feel like Fox is very interested in them, but I don't know that. I don't have the data specifically in front of me. So I think I agree with this. I think it sucks if you're a Penn State fan, but it's just now in this bigger conference, which I think is what you explained in that article last year of this is how it works.
And you're on the East Coast.
Yeah,
right?
it's just gonna happen more often. It's gonna be harder to come by a noon game or a night game, and I think you have to be willing to make concessions at a Friday game. I don't think it's ever gonna happen because it's logistically a nightmare for people in State College and everything involved. But I think that's what you have to do. I don't know, and who knows if that. I think if that Washington game is on Peacock, I think that could be a night-ish game, just with that women's volleyball thing. It's no inside source or anything like that, but I think it's not impossible. And that's a concession that you have to make then. The game's on Peacock, and it's not as easy to watch. Although I don't know if I buy that anymore. Okay. All right, my big one. I'm going to pretend that Penn State's going to beat Wisconsin. I'm hopeful that they beat Wisconsin. So does game day come to campus? And like you and I talked about, where do game day and big noon set up? And what is that split like? I think that's very if we're looking, if any beat writer or feature writer or sports media writer out there is looking to solve the question of why game day has staying power or why big noon might overtake game day, they should come to State College, Pennsylvania on November 2nd or 3rd, whatever day it is, and experience those two shows, assuming that they come. Because I think they are. I think if Penn State's undefeated, I think you can't not go to game day for Penn State, Ohio State.
No, I think unless something really crazy happens and they go off, and that's the weekend when they do a D2 game or some crazy thing like that. Otherwise, you're here. Those teams will both be, even though Ohio State lost, those are both top 10 teams. This is the best Penn State's been this late in the season ever. The stadium will be fun. The atmosphere will be fun. But the competition, the behind-the-scenes competition, and even the front of the scenes, where those shows set up logistically, because we're assuming that same thing, that it's a noon game on Fox, right? So you want people to be around as your show ends. It'll be fun. It'll be fun. It'll be one of the more enjoyable parts of that very fast-moving early day if that's a noon game.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. All right, those are our three storylines. That's not all of the three storylines, but that's about it. This week's Old Guy, Young Guy brought to you by Steve's Bar Tab in Nashville.
I don't know if it was the tab, but maybe it was the approach.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's an old guy. I don't know if it's an old guy thing or a young guy thing. We bought the we bought the band a round of drinks. I don't know if that's something people do. So I'm curious. Is buying the band a round of drinks something? Or is that just some old guy, whatever?
Well, I think that goes back like Nashville culture is to tip the band. I think.
And we had done that, but we had been there
Yeah,
a while, so
yeah.
it seemed like the next logical
Yes,
step.
yes, and I'm sure they appreciated that.
Well,
Okay.
go ahead. Go ahead. Finish that, and then I'll tell you
Okay.
this part.
Okay. I already know the spoiler because I was included on a text message chain about it.
That's right.
But I will say, I don't know. I think that's like, I think that's if you're in a bar and you buy someone that is performing a drink, like I think that is a very respectful thing to do, and I think maybe you don't need to do it like every time you go to a bar, but like anytime there's a good musician, I always want to make sure that musician knows it because I couldn't get up there and sing and do all that stuff and know all the lyrics to all those songs.
Yeah, so meant to be a respectful act. And in fact, I don't know if we talked about the backstory of this, but we saw this band last year briefly, and we had Venmoed them some money to play a song, and we ended up leaving before they played it, or maybe their set ended. So the lead drummer lady, who's the namesake of the band, Venmoed us our money back. Said, "Hey, we're sorry we didn't get to your song," which I thought was kind of a classy move, right? So we reached out beforehand, said, "Hey, we're coming down. Where do we find your schedule?" So then we saw him. We stuck around long enough that we had tipped him once. I'm like, we've been here a few hours. It's great. We'll buy him a round of drinks. And it was okay until there was a 3-person band, and the one person said, "Hey, thanks for this, but apparently I used to do this really much too well and too good, so I don't do it anymore." I'm like, "Oh, oops. Sorry."
Yeah.
But whatever.
Somebody else can have it, you know?
Exactly. They shared.
There you go. Yeah, I think I don't. I will say like State College is really the only place that I go out with a bar band. Bar band anymore. I wish that more State College bands would put up a tip sign because I think I would tip, and I think a lot of drunk alumni would tip those bands.
No, I think students were. If it were Venmo, right? Like do this,
Yeah.
and they pushed it harder. I think they probably would. Yeah.
So okay. All right. I don't know if we'll do. So here's what's coming this week. I'm going to do a survey this week. I think we'll do a mid-season check-in, kind of both on team, media, all of our kind of stuff, usual stuff there. Then I think we'll see if I write about Tyler Warren. I'm feeling like I'm going to write about Tyler Warren. They again have concepts of a plan to write about Tyler Warren. So I think we'll go there. I think you're going to write something. You told me you were fired up about something.
Oh, I get in early with the stadium thing.
Oh, right.
I'm going to be fired up about, I think, Coach Franklin and his status for next week.
Okay.
So look forward to someone stepping in his corner as if he needs it to write about that.
I don't know. I think he does. I mean, we're definitely, I would say on that spectrum, we are definitely on the more pro side. I think this year I've probably had more honest conversations about it, but I think in general we skew more towards the pro Franklin side. So, but I don't know if everybody else in the fan base always feels that way. I'm sure there's a lot of people that are like, "Oh, you beat USC, so what?" They weren't ranked. Like looking at it, they're not wrong. It's just that's not necessarily the right context to look at everything through. So, do go read Steve's piece from this weekend. It mentions Nashville, but not in the way you think it mentions Nashville. And then also he called out what I also noticed, which partly because of that damn drone, 7,000 ads, just ads everywhere on USC's field, like it just everywhere. Which it was funny to watch and see. So be sure to read that. There's new stuff. I found the italic font. I found the Retro's 90s italic font. I was proud about that. It took a while to find it, but I found it. So go check that out. Thanks to John for joining us. John T for joining us. And then we have a pretty good guest for next week, so it worked out pretty well. In the meantime, we've got a website. On that website, it's called stuffsummersays. Oh wait, no, the website is stuffsummersays.com. On that website, there's a section called With
Steve.
Thank you for telling me I'm doing good. We have emails. Mine's Darian at stuffsummersays.com.
Mine is Steve at stuffsummersays.com.
We're gonna get there. 5 stars, thumbs up, subscribe, blah blah blah. And then we have Twitter handles. Mine's at stuffsummersays. Steve says
Steve Samsel.
Proud of us. We did good. Goodbye.